And panel members, please come to the stage and take your seat. All the speakers and panel members, please come to the stage. And welcome back, everyone. I hope all of you had a good coffee break and get some time to connect with your colleagues. So now we will move into our panel discussion segment. Along with our speakers, for session 4, we have 3 additional panelists for the panel discussion. So while the panelists are taking their seat, let me introduce our additional panelists. So one of our additional panelists are Dr. Christine Allen. Dr. Allen is professor at University of Toronto and CEO and co-founder of Intrepid Labs Incorporation. Our another panelist is Dr. Wang. Dr. Wang is the Deputy Director of Therapeutic Performance from Office of Research and Standards under Office of Generic Drugs, FDA. And our final additional panelist is Dr. Daniel Willett. Dr. Willett is the Senior Research Scientist from the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality Research under Office of Pharmaceutical Quality at FDA. So Dr. Allen and Dr. Willett, they will be joining online, and welcome back to all of our speakers and the panelists. So for the audience, a quick reminder, if you would like to ask any questions, please come to the microphone at the front so that everyone can hear you clearly. And for our online attendees, please keep posting your questions in the chat. We'll be collecting and bringing those into the discussion as well. So with that, I would like to ask the audience first. If you have any questions, please come to the microphone. Or maybe I can. I see. Yep.
I thought the talks were great and much appreciate your coming here to give those talks. Paul from Amgen, some of your comments were really interesting, and I was curious about, like, in the area where you're deciding which drugs to follow up on for pursuing in development. You go to some databases potentially for looking at, like, the value added or how difficult it is to manufacture the drug, what it involves in putting it together. Some of it is your own companies, how you perform and what kind of things you need to go into making the drug, like what sort of resources you need. But the broader marketplace, that data is often proprietary. Are you able to access that and apply that? And is that something more an AI thing, or is it something that you anticipate doing in the future? Because right now, a lot of that decision making is done, like, without the use of AI. You're looking at the proprietary data that you might pay for to get, but feeding that, they probably have restrictions into whether you can feed that into an AI system.
Yeah, if I think I understand your question. So Amgen uses an enterprise-based, artificial intelligence tool that it doesn't share, proprietary information back to the model to be used. So, but it does work internally and can develop internally. So we don't have the same concerns, but I think if I could make an analogous comparison to what I think I understand your question to be is for companies that work with clinical research organizations or CDMOs or these kind of things. I think that there are some things to think about how do we we convince those organizations then to move to this structured content approach, for example, and how do we protect information as it's shared from them to the sponsor that's buying that information? Hopefully that's related to what you're asking about. I mean, I think maybe you could elaborate more about.
No, I think it's useful. So data accumulation takes resources, right? And so companies that accumulate data like IQVIA or Symphony, they monetize their data so that they can continue to generate that data. So and then someone that takes that data and uses it, they expect a reimbursement for that. But if you apply it to an AI model that's open to everyone, then that becomes a problem for them, right? So sort of thinking about any data accumulation thing, what are the resources that go into putting the data together? And then how do you make that a sustainable piece? In some cases, we pay taxes to the government to do some of those and do the data accumulation. And right now the government is shut down for something, so we don't get some data pieces, right? So like Wall Street is really upset because there's no data flying into their decision-making right now. But this is really interesting to think about, and how do we, as an industry, source that data, and is there willingness to pool data resources together with other companies? For example, let's say your company wants to go into a new product area, but you don't have the data, but you're interested in looking at that, and how do you get that? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, I'd say that scenario is more aligned with, say, like the pandemic circumstances, right? So where companies did sort of put aside, some of their typical caution, with sharing IP, and they work together to produce something that everybody deemed as being effective and helpful. And so that's sort of an answer to what you're saying, but I don't know if Amgen is dealing with that circumstance directly, because we're using a lot of our internal data, and we're fortunate as a big company to have a lot of that data and to be kind of one of the leaders in this space.
Yeah, we see this in generics, because some generic companies make that decision. Oh, do I want to go into topicals? Am I interested in going into inhalation products? But all of that requires like additional data forecasting and things like that to justify that business case.
I think it's a great question. I don't know if I have all the answers to that from a generics perspective, because I don't spend as much time thinking about generics, but it's a good question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other question from the audience?
All right, this is an online question. As a regulatory affairs professional, a critical challenge lies in identifying how we must prepare ourselves to effectively navigate the growing role of artificial intelligence. Which core competencies and capabilities should be prioritized to remain relevant and effective in this evolving landscape? As AI reshapes the regulatory environment, developing the right skill sets will be essential to ensuring strategic alignment, compliance, and long-term success. What would those skills be?
I'm going to try to address that. I think the capability, curiosity is very important. So you need to select so-called AI champions among your people who will go and try these tools first, try to learn, and then teach your colleagues. And skills which are important is understanding what these tools can do and what they cannot do, and some basic principles, like what is tokens, what is a context window, and how to use these tools, basically. So there are a lot of such courses in the internet, and basically all people in the organization and your department need to go there, but some may go first and teach others. Like I was given workshops inside my organization to my colleagues to show them with the real examples how to use these tools for their tasks.
To add on that, to me, I feel like AI is really just a very powerful tool. So what it really enables is, I feel like all the data information are out there, but now with the AI, you can get them at your fingertip in minutes, right? So really the key is to retain the ability to have the critical thinking. So I think most of the people in the industry or in the regulatory agencies are going to be the AI users instead of developers. So as a users, to me, I feel what's really important, and actually I have a question to you, which, from your insightful presentation, is know how to write the correct prompt. So I feel like you can have two people, one experienced, one inexperienced, using the exact same tool, but for the exact same goal. But knowing how to write your prompts in enough detail, critical thinking to guide the AI to really think along your line is the key. So my curiosity question to you, I see you share some of the very insightful cases and prompts. So in one of your examples, I think you said there was a question like what important information can be extended. So my question to you is how many iterations you did and how do you define or tell AI what's considered as important?
So about the prompting, the first part of the question, it's, in my opinion, if you have some specific task in mind, it's better to create the system prompt first, which will describe all that you really need. And for creation of this system prompt, you can also use AI. Just ask, okay, create me a system prompt. It should assist me in this and that task. And then the prompt for the specific question can be quite concise. You just need to give the data and very concisely, ask a question what you want to know from this data. It will use the instructions from the system prompt to give you the response you want. And if you see that the result is not really what you wanted, you may modify this system prompt. It usually doesn't take much iterations, actually. Either it will be from the first attempt, or it will work maybe from the second or third iteration of system prompt.
And before the question, if I could just add to that, I think, what I heard is, asking good questions, being curious, being a good critical thinker, those sound like science-based skills, right? So I'd say to the person asking a question, be science-based. And the irony is use the tool itself, pick your favorite AI and start having a conversation with it about the things you should learn, to understand this new industry that we're all in. I think one of the commentators yesterday said, everybody feels a little uncomfortable because this is so new, right? And so I think to add to the whole thing, be a self-starter, dive in, don't hesitate, and just be okay with feeling uncomfortable and not knowing, and then you'll start learning fast if you just dive in. That's what I would say. So.
Yeah, I just want to echo that and also provide the recommendation to start employing these tools sort of across aspects of your life. Like yesterday, I had our AI internal to GSK make a table for me, and it was really cool. But it was for upcoming conferences, and that experience gives me more confidence when I will maybe make a table for a regulatory submission. And so I think it's going to take that iterative approach of playing around in low stakes environments to gain the trust in the tools when it comes to something as important as a regulatory submission.
I've maybe got 2 points. So one is particularly remember, AI is not just large language models. There is big data models, there's random forest that can really help you on the science side of it. So large language models is part of it, but there's the other side as well. I think the other bit when we've looked at what training we're going to be providing as well is thinking about who the users are and what do they need training in. So if you are recruiting people in who are AI coders, they actually need the regulatory training and the data structure and that side of the training, as well as the broader piece of, well, what is AI? Where can I use it? And so it's about, I think there's that element of it as well, is just to make sure you considered who your user groups are and what training do they actually need for that awareness piece.
That actually led me a question for Dr. Allen, but we have one question in the room, so I'll take that first and we'll come back to you.
Thank you. This is Josh from FD. So I have a question for Dr. Stus, maybe also other panelists. So you mentioned something like the context window of 1 million to 2 million token size would be an option. So to my understanding, that's pretty large language models, right? Yesterday, we heard a lot from the industry saying that for the generic industry specifically, maybe sometimes the cost is a concern. So I'd like to hear more about, from the industry perspective, how do people think about the necessity of using large language models and to generate the real value?
So,
and the feasibility.
Yeah, the cost perspective, yes?
Yeah, the feasibility, yeah.
Okay, so in the particular example I have presented, the large context was for analysis of public data. And for this, we can use even free tools. This was an example of AI Studio in Gemini. It's free to use. So it's no costs behind.
Okay, so you use the free version.
Yes.
You do not deploy to your own server, something like that.
But for internal documents, of course, when we use the API for that, if we have a model which is capable of this large context windows, like 1 million tokens, there are separate costs for when you go outside of usual 108 to 28,000 tokens. And yeah, if you usually it's not, if it would be expensive if every employee in the organization would put all the documents they have and force this large context window. That's true. So that some smart strategies is indeed required to avoid having too much expenses on the API. That could be a problem, of course. But in our experience, these costs were not huge. So even though the whole organization received this chat tool and they try to attach documents like PDF files to it, so these costs were still manageable for the organization. Of course, it's a matter of the system administrator or whatever, someone needs to take care of it.
But moving forward, suppose we are utilizing the Gen AI to a very large extent. I envision the industry will have to deploy their own servers with the large language models because of the confidentiality or something like that. So I'd like to hear more from the other panelists regarding when you look at the future, like let's say 3 to 5 years, is this going to be a concern for the industry? Or yeah, how do you look at this? Like,
it's something I think about a lot. Just me personally, can't speak for GSK, but are we going to get a system of have and have nots, those who have really robustly deployed these models and those who maybe lag behind? I mean, I think AI is here, and what will differentiate the companies of the future is how robustly they adopt it and use it and move forward. And you can think of it not just in terms of the costs for the companies, but also the regulators and the infrastructure that might be required for participating in some of these collaborative assessments. And, there are still countries that are back on the paper submissions. And so how do we, as a globe, advance everything to where more sort of developed, for lack of a better word, countries are? And it's something that I think there needs to be attention to. And also the environmental costs of AI in terms of, data is not necessarily without impacts on our world. And I live in Virginia. There are a lot of data centers, and it's a big concern. So it's something that I think needs to be brought to the fore to discuss before it gets too late.
Dr. Allen, as a both a leading academic and entrepreneur, you have seen AI move from research into real-world formulation and manufacturing settings. So what lessons have you learned about translating AI and automation from lab innovation to practical application in drug development? And how do you think that regulatory agencies and industrial partners can work together to ensure that these technologies can deliver measurable values?
That's a great question. Thank you, and delighted to be able to participate virtually. I think one of the things that I've heard a little bit of is just reminding ourselves that AI is not magic, it's a tool. And so it really is about finding, the highest and best use cases. And I love the previous comment about, kind of just integrating AI tools into your daily life. And then you see that they're easy to use. They're not replacing you. In fact, they're just enhancing things that you can do. And I think it's the same with, the work that I've done in my academic lab and then spinning out a company based around the prototype technology that we developed. The company and working with a number of different pharma partners through that company have enabled us to really develop this technology, kick the tires on the technology in a way that ensures that it actually is delivering value to the market. And these tools require that. They require that real world application and input to ensure that they are useful, that they are safe, that they are ethical. The thing that I would say is that we've been able to show that we're able to do things that would have taken me, we can identify promising formulations in days rather than weeks or months. So it really does allow you to navigate that design space, a much larger formulation design space, as an example, very quickly. And then it's really about ensuring that those formulations that we identify are scalable, are manufacturable, and then are going to deliver values in the clinic. And that's where, time really will tell. Just like we're watching these AI discovered drugs and comparing them to drugs discovered using conventional means, only time will tell just how promising these tools are. And of course, in time, those tools will improve. But overall, I'm seeing, and we certainly see with the FDA, a genuine openness to development of these tools in a responsible way and adoption. And I think as long as we make clear to people that these tools won't replace you, but individuals that are willing to consider use and use these tools may replace you, then I think people will be encouraged to learn and adopt and so on.
Thank you. Other panelists are also welcome to put your inputs. We have one question from the audience.
If there's other panelists who want to opine on your question. Is that fine? Okay. Thank you so much for, your different presentations this morning and the different ways in which you're using AI tools in the industry. My question comes when you're using these tools, obviously you need some kind of reassurance about the data integrity and the validation. What kind of processes do you implement within your firms to ensure the data integrity and the process validations? Are you also using additional AI tools for that process? If not, what suggestions do you have? That's my question.
If I may start, in my examples, these were all low-risk cases. So the validation was actually the expert assessment of this response. So we were starting from already known cases, what we already know, to validate if model gives us good results, to then apply it for the ongoing development product.
So if I understand, you're already doing this in a traditional process and you're validating it with an AI process.
Yes.
But if we are moving to an entirely AI process, because that's the goal, and that's how we hope to expedite the AI process, how would we, when we don't have a comparative traditional approach, how do we validate AI data.
Could I ask for clarification? I mean, do you really think the goal is to move to a 100% AI objective in all cases? I think that, I mean, I think it's worth asking that question because I know from our perspective, at least right now, we think,
I understand.
yeah,
I
we think we'll
understand.
keep a human in the loop and it's hard to know how it'll advance. I mean, I think where you're right is that it could change dramatically in the next 1 year, the capabilities, right? But I would suspect that if the technology advances that much, then I bet the ability to validate would also advance with it. I think right now we're using, I'd have to agree with Dr. Stus, said we're using kind of the human in the loop to check the output.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in the regular traditional world, especially as a physician, you like to know the mechanisms of actions of how things are working, right? Sure. You may not always know the mechanism of actions, but in most cases, we figure out there is some function relationships. In the AI world, this is where I'm struggling, and I'm hoping that, you, the experts in the industry, may have thought about it, but if not, at least have some hints on where can we look? What are the possibilities? I understand where we are now, we are not there, where our 100% AI is going to work. But what possible suggestions is my question.
What I would add to that is I'd say that the more we manage our data well, this is my opinion. I can see what my fellow panelists think, but the more we manage our data well and have good data hygiene, if I could use that language, then when we implement AI on top of that, we can be even more confident and perhaps have built-in validation capabilities, right? And so I think that's a legitimate answer to what you're asking about. I think that of course, if you take a mixed view where you have some structured data and you have some sort of generative AI work over here on the side, like I described, well, then, you have to have some kind of validation that's probably going to involve a human being, at least for the near term, right? Those are my thoughts.
Yeah. For the use case of checklists, I think it's possible to create a validation data set, like 100 protocols and checklists, which have already been created by human experts. And then we can use this data set for verification, for validation of different models in this workflow, and also use another generative AI tool to assess the results, basically. That I think that was mentioned yesterday. The tools are already starting to appear. These are open source tools, and we can use them.
I think coming back to sort of, we think as well about the machine learning models, there's actually quite a lot of statistical methods that are out and exist. Okay, maybe they tend to be sort of buried in some of the more maths and stats places, but they do exist. So if you have those sorts of experts, they should know where it is. I think there is also now coming a lot more the sort of things like Python have open sort of code checkers, and they also now have statistical valid tools, and they'll do a range of different methods for you, sort of mathematical methods. So we certainly use the Python one quite a lot.
If I just add one more point to your question, I thought about data integrity. I mean, we believe that if you're taking this, so say from the regulatory perspective, to be clear, this one dossier approach, and you have, especially when automation is involved, that's going to enhance data integrity, right? And I think that probably other approaches, within sort of the industry would have a similar conclusion, right? That's something I wanted to add. I just thought of, yeah. Thanks. Thank you.
Hi, good morning all. My name is Shivangi. I'm from FDA. I have a question for Mr. J. Paul. I think you touched a little bit on the legacy data where a lot of these documents could be a paper or a handwritten scanned documents, even the unstructured data, right? And we hear a lot about like garbage in, garbage out with these AI tools coming in. I just want to hear your thoughts, a little bit more on how we can harmonize some of this decade-old knowledge into the newly transformed data without losing the credibility of the information that was stored in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe not directly related to the legacy submission question, but we currently deal with a lot of information internally that is PDF based, right? let's take, technical reports, for example, right? And as of right now, not all that data is structured, as you all know, within your own industries. But we've developed tools that can then, pull out the information in those and structure it fairly well. And we're creating databases to manage that. So I think that's a near-term solution that sort of addresses your question with respect to legacy products. I don't know exactly, what it'll look like in the future, for, say, converting, if I could use that word, that's my word, converting a legacy submission into a structured submission. Maybe that's a stretch, and who knows, maybe the life cycle of the product has lived its path at that point. You know what I mean? There's other things, that would be considered. So that's kind of what I would say, is that right now we have tools that can look at PDFs and pull information out of that and structure the information to some extent, and we can identify if there's semi-structured, unstructured data there as well, and we can kind of say de-risk, if I could use that phrase. Yeah, that's near term. Yeah.
Sorry, I missed the opportunity, but I do have a follow-up question for Dr. Allen for her earlier comment. So you mentioned with the AI assistance, now we can identify a formulation design space in a day, and then subsequently also to know conceptually whether that formulation is manufacturable and scalable, all those. I think talking from generic standpoint, for instance, for complex products, right? There is a regulation requirement in terms of the composition, usually is already defined. So that in principle should give an edge to the development. And it all comes down to how you effectively develop your manufacturing procedure to really hit that target. And the target is already known. So can you elaborate a bit more if you have any experiences, how AI actually have been utilized to facilitate the manufacturing development for generic when you have already the target product?
Actually, there's quite a few examples, I think, or companies that are implementing AI quite effectively in manufacturing. So it's not an area that we work in specifically. We're really working in, AI and automation to accelerate drug formulation development, and then work with CDMOs, to then scale the formulation through GMP manufacturing. But I will say to you, what we do is we train an algorithm. So the algorithm learns the relationship between composition, processing parameters, and then the performance attributes and characteristics of that formulation. So it has all of those learnings, and it's not a black box. And those learnings can then be used at the manufacturing stage when the formulation needs to be tweaked. We're using equipment in the preclinical kind of formulation setting that is all scalable to a manufacturing facility. And so we're able to work with the CDMO. And so they will tell us, how can we increase this or how can we reduce that? And we're able to look back at the algorithm and see what it's learned through the formulation work that we did, and share those learnings with them to guide their efforts. But really the key, in the work that we did, and coming back to one of the prior questions around data integrity and data quality, is this combination of AI and automation. And the algorithms that we're working with, these are not just generating in silico predictions. We're always experimentally validating those predictions. And so I think that is really the key point here, is that you ensure that you have algorithms where at least a portion of those predictions are experimentally validated. So then you have trust in the predictions that are being put forward. And like I said, that algorithm through its learnings can then be used further, during the manufacturing phase and also during clinical development, because you had that strong understanding between composition and performance.
And sorry, Ian, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's very informative. And then I think circling back to actually your QBDD concept, which is really novel and has a lot of potential. Can you elaborate a little bit more, like in terms of the QBDD versus QBD? Because when QBD was introduced, there was a lot of confusion. People consider QBD is just another name for DOE, for instance, but they are conceptually different, right? Because QBD still is already, you do the systemic, scientific, and risk-based analysis at the very beginning of your development. And you build that into your whole supposedly development, right? Like the streamline. So I feel like the digital tool here really is going to probably enable more streamlined development instead of fragmented in terms of R&D all the way to the later, right? So just a bit more elaborate.
Absolutely, yeah. So it is still absolutely QBD. But what we're trying to do is say, well, how much can we predict now? So we as I said, we are going to be publishing on this in a couple of months, but we've taken 3 processes where we've looked at, in our case, just because that's our experience is in crystallization. So developing a crystallization and isolation process. We've taken 3 different APIs, 2 of which were commercial products, and developed the process using as much as possible digital first. So we're really focusing on scale down experiments. How do we parameterize the models? And then risk-based evaluation for the scale up on the elements that are not covered by the models. We can't model everything yet. And so across those 3 products and comparing it to other processes we've done in-house with similar complexity, we've about halved the amount of API that we've used. So that is a proxy for sustainability metrics in life cycle analysis on it. And we're about a third less in terms of the number of actual practical experiments that we had to run. We work in an academic environment, so the timeline piece we didn't really measure that because we realized that maybe was less relevant. But certainly for us, the digital piece allows us to have bigger design space. We can explore it a lot more, and it allows us to do the multi-objective optimization. So we can optimize much better against cost, sustainability. We can have a better understanding of how close we are to, you know, the edge, inverted commas, the edge of failure, and how and then target if we need some additional experimental work to verify and validate that. Then we still go and do that, absolutely. But it's really about how you use digital tools to reduce the time and the amount of material that you use.
Yeah, and talking about data, I would like to ask Dr. Willett, so your expertise in advanced spectroscopic and imaging techniques such as Raman, NIR, terahertz, combined with multivariate data analysis is highly relevant to today's discussion. And that is my personal interest to know or ask that how do you see that AI and machine learning enhancing the interpretation of high-dimensional spectroscopic and imaging data for complex drug products? And in your view, what are the key challenges in ensuring the reliability and regulatory acceptance of AI-assisted analytical method?
Thanks, Jayanti. So when I think about AI and machine learning in this context, so for spectroscopy and imaging data, I see the kind of the immediate path forward as AI-assisted model development evaluation. So it can really help us in these early stages, as some of these other speakers have already mentioned, you know, building your DFE, optimizing your data preprocessing, and guiding your model selection. So these are critical steps that often take the most time and expert judgment. So we can leverage AI there, can really make these processes more efficient and data-driven. And so once that foundation is set, we can then apply, you know, traditional machine learning approaches, classification or regression models, and then use AI on the back end to help analyze the outputs. So for instance, one of the ways I use it is using the AI to kind of help interpret your loadings or your score plots to reveal patterns that an SME can then review for analytical or mechanistic meaning. And so this has real potential to accelerate the adoption, hopefully, of spectroscopic PAT, especially for things like real-time monitoring of CQAs. We just now saw simple Raman-based models move through the emerging technology program for applications like glucose monitoring and biopharmaceuticals. That only happened earlier this year. So if AI can help us streamline how these models are built and validated, it can really expand their reach and adoption within the space. When we think about more the complex spectroscopic image data sets that we would work on personally, like those that we use in research on in vitro approaches to bioequivalence, it can really serve as a powerful analytical assistant almost. So kind of helping us look at these data sets and correlate things like microstructural or compositional features with the in vitro performance metrics that we're trying to evaluate. So in this context, kind of the framework for validation and regulatory acceptance already exists for multivariate models, right? So AI is just helping us optimize these inputs and outputs within this existing structure that has kind of already been established.
Thank you. We are on time. There are more tempting questions that I also would like to ask, but with the time, we need to start our next session. So maybe we can connect offline. For the online questions of which we could not able to answer, we'll try to follow up with you. So with that, I would like to thank to all of our speakers and panelists for giving us some good insights. And with that, yeah, I'll welcome our next session leads for the next session. Thank you.